Okay, let's try and make sense of this. It really feels like we're looking at an economic jigsaw puzzle right now, doesn't it?
It really does. You've got pieces that just don't seem to fit together easily.
Exactly. Like consumer confidence is down quite a bit, actually. But then, boom, the jobs report comes in better than anyone thought.
Right. And then GDP, the big one, it actually shrank, negative territory.
But wait, there's like another way to slice it that shows things are actually pretty solid.
The core GDP figure, yeah.
Ugh.
It paints a very different picture.
And then you throw in the political stuff, elections heating up, some, let's say, unique policy ideas floating around.
Definitely unique. So the real question for you listening is, what on earth does all this mean for your finances, for your planning?
That's a goal today, right?
Unpack this.
Exactly. We've got a couple of key sources to help us. First, there's the Ladenburg MarketView Weekly from early May that gives us the economic rundown, the market reaction.
And second, we're looking at the electoral vote news from about the same time. That's going to dive into the politics, key races, legal stuff.
Got it. So we're connecting the dots between the economy and the political scene.
That's the plan. Trying to pull out what really matters for you from all this noise.
All right, let's dive into the economy first. That consumer confidence dropped down to 86.0 in April. That was, well, lower than expected, right? And a big fall from March.
A significant drop, yeah. And what's interesting is the report directly links it, or at least suggests a strong link, to all the talk about tariffs.
Ah, so people are actually hearing this tariff talk and thinking, uh-oh.
It seems like it. Worries about prices going up for everyday stuff, maybe uncertainty about jobs if tariffs hit certain industries. It feels like that policy debate is really starting to filter down.
Okay, so that potential future pain is making people nervous now. But then, that April jobs report, 177,000 new jobs, that sounds pretty good.
It does on the surface. Certainly better than the projections. Shows there's still hiring happening, especially in the private sector.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. You have to remember those revisions for February and March. They were revised down quite a bit, actually, by about 58,000 jobs total.
Ah, okay, so maybe the trend isn't quite as strong as that one April number suggests.
Exactly. Still positive, but maybe, cooling off slightly. Unemployment held steady at 4.2%. Job openings fell a bit, but quits actually increased, which can sometimes signal worker confidence. It's mixed.
Mixed signals again. Okay, and that brings us to GDP. First quarter, a negative read, minus 0.3%. That sounds like contraction.
It does, and if you just saw that headline, you'd definitely pause. But remember the tariffs.
Right, the connection again.
The report highlights this massive, 41% surge in imports just before the end of the quarter.
Because businesses were rushing to get stuff in before potential tariffs hit.
That's the most likely explanation, yeah. Stockpiling. And because imports are subtracted when calculating GDP.
That huge jump dragged the whole number down, even if other parts of the economy were okay.
Precisely. It creates a kind of distortion, which is why looking at core GDP is really helpful here.
Explain that again.
Sure. Core GDP basically takes out the volatile stuff, net exports, so those imports we just talked about, government spending, and changes in business inventories. It focuses more on underlying private demand.
And what did that show?
It showed growth of 3% in the first quarter. Pretty solid, actually, and consistent with what we've seen in previous years.
Okay, so that's crucial. The headline number looks bad, maybe tariff-related bad, but the underlying domestic economy, the core, still seems to be expanding reasonably well.
That's the takeaway from the report, yes.
Yeah.
The negative headline doesn't necessarily signal fundamental weakness.
Got it. Okay, what about inflation? Always a big concern. The PCE index.
Right, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index.
Okay.
Month over month, both the main number and the core number, which strips out food and energy, were flat. So no big jump in April itself.
Okay, flat is good, right? Or not bad.
Well, yes and no. The year-over-year numbers are still up. Headline PCE is up 2.3% compared to last year, and core PCE is up 2.6%.
Still above the Fed's target, then. What's driving that?
It's mainly services.
Yeah.
The report points specifically to inflation in the services sector. Think healthcare, insurance, transport, that's keeping the overall number elevated. Falling energy prices have actually helped keep it from being even higher.
So goods prices might be moderating, but the cost of services is still pushing inflation along. All right, so what does all this mean for the Federal Reserve? They've got an interest rate decision coming up, cut rates, hold steady.
Given that strong-ish jobs report, even with the revisions, and core inflation still running above their 2% target, plus all this uncertainty around tariffs, The general thinking is they're unlikely to cut rates at the next meeting.
Makes sense. Play it safe for now.
Probably.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the markets, they're still betting on rate cuts later this year, maybe 3 or 4.
Why the disconnect? If the Fed's hesitant.
I think it comes down to rising worries about a potential recession down the road. Markets might be looking past the immediate data and thinking the Fed will have to cut eventually if things slow down more significantly.
Okay, so watch the Fed, but also watch the market's expectations. What other indicators are key right now?
Definitely keep an eye on the ISM Services PMI. That gives us a read on the health of the services sector.
Which is huge, right? Like 80% of the economy.
Exactly. That index has been trending down a bit lately, but it's still above 50.
And 50 is the line between expansion and contraction.
Correct. So the services sector is still growing, just maybe not as fast as it was.
Yeah.
It's another one to watch closely.
Okay. And just quickly on the markets themselves, stocks seem to have a good week recently, despite all this confusing data.
They did, yeah. The big U.S. indexes, NASDAQ, Dow, S&P 500, all posted pretty solid gains. Small and mid-cap stocks did well, too, even international markets.
Huh. So investors were looking past the negative GDP, maybe?
Possibly focusing on the core GDP, or maybe the hope of eventual rate cuts. Fixed income, bonds were more mixed, likely because of that interest rate uncertainty we talked about.
So amidst all this volatility, especially with the tariff stuff,
No.
what's the message for someone trying to manage their investments?
The report really stresses the difficulty, maybe the futility, of trying to time the market perfectly, especially now.
Jumping in and out based on headlines.
Yeah, it's historically very hard to get right. The emphasis is on staying invested, assuming you have a long-term plan, and focusing on those long-term goals. They even note the S&P 500 actually recovered pretty quickly from the dip after those initial tariff announcements back in April.
So discipline and perspective are key. Okay, quite a picture on the economy. Let's shift gears to the political side. The electoral vote news source gives us a lot to chew on there. Starting in Georgia, the Senate race, Governor Kemp deciding not to run against Senator Ossoff. That's big.
It's definitely significant. And the speculation, as the report points out, is pretty strong that he's keeping his powder dry for a potential White House run in 2028.
Right. But for 2026, this helps Ossoff considerably.
Oh, absolutely. The polling included in the report showed Kemp was really the only Republican who ran close to Ossoff, hypothetically speaking.
Like, within the margin of error close?
Yeah, one poll had it Kemp 49%, Ossoff 46%, with a 3.1% margin of error. So very tight. Against other potential GOP candidates, Ossoff had leads of like 6 to 10 points.
And the report specifically mentions Marjorie Taylor Greene.
It does. It notes that Ossoff actually polled best against her, leading by double digits in multiple polls.
And there's that Georgia law issue too, right?
Exactly. You can't run for 2 offices at once. So if she were to run for Senate, she'd have to give up her House seat. That's a big gamble.
Okay, moving north to Maine, Senator Susan Collins has a Democratic challenger now for the primary.
Yes, Jordan Wood. His background is interesting. Son of clergy, activist against Citizens United, worked for Katie Porter. So he comes with a certain progressive profile.
But the big question mark is Governor Mills.
That's the wild card, yeah. If Governor Janet Mills decides to jump in, that changes the whole race instantly. She's very popular there.
Right. And New Hampshire, another Senate race, an open seat. Seems like the Democratic side is clearing out.
It looks that way. Representative Maggie Goodlander decided not to run, which likely leaves Representative Chris Pappas as the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination.
And Republican side.
The report suggests there isn't really a heavyweight Republican candidate emerging yet, which, could make it an easier hold for the Democrats.
Okay, similar stories, it seems, in Michigan and Minnesota. Open seats, contested Democratic primaries, but maybe not the strongest GOP fields yet.
That's the assessment, yes. In Michigan, you've got Representative Haley Stevens joining State Senator Mallory McMorrow and Abdul El Sayed on the Democratic side. Strong contenders. On the Republican side, former Rep. Mike Rogers is maybe the biggest name, but the overall field is described as, well, not particularly strong.
And Minnesota, Senator Tina Smith retiring.
Right. Representative Angie Craig is running, aiming to be the first LGBTQ senator from Minnesota. Again, the report characterizes the potential Republican opponents as underwhelming.
Even in Kentucky, Senator McConnell's seat. It's expected to stay Republican, right? Even with a primary challenge now.
Yeah, Representative Andy Barr is challenging the former AG Daniel Cameron in the primary. But given Kentucky's leanings, the odds heavily favor the GOP holding that seat regardless of who wins the primary.
Okay, let's look at a couple of House races mentioned. Maine's 2nd District, Jared Golden facing former Governor Paul LePage. That sounds contentious.
Oh, definitely. LePage has a very distinct, controversial style, and he's trying for a comeback after moving to Florida for a bit. It'll be a closely watched race, testing how much his Trump-aligned approach resonates now.
And then in Arizona, AZ05, an open seat, a former NFL kicker is running, Jay Feely.
Yep, Jay Feely, running as a Republican, very pro-tariff, tough on the border platform.
The report kind of questions this trend of athletes in politics.
It does. It mentions Tuberville's success, but also others who haven't made the leap successfully. It's
Yeah.
an interesting phenomena. And Feely's tariff stance connects right back to our economic discussion.
True. And one more House note, AOC deciding not to run for oversight chair.
Yeah, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The speculation is this might free her up or signal she's maybe thinking about higher office down the line, like Senate.
Interesting. Okay. Now, for some of those unconventional policy ideas attributed to former President Trump, the 100% tariff on foreign films.
Yeah, that one's quite something. The report does a good job breaking down why it's probably completely impractical.
How-
Well, think about modern movie making. It's global. Funding, actors, crew, shooting locations. They use Titanic as an example. How do you even decide if a film is foreign enough for a 100% tariff? It's a logistical nightmare.
And the justification was national security for movies.
That's what was reported, yes, which seems tenuous at best. It's hard to see the connection.
Right. And then reopening Alcatraz.
Another head-scratcher. As the report points out, Alcatraz was shut down decades ago, precisely because it was falling apart and cost too much to maintain.
So reopening it would be astronomically expensive, presumably.
You'd think so. The report kind of wryly speculates maybe the idea came from watching Escape from Alcatraz.
Wow. Okay. And, oh, the Star Wars Day post detail.
Ah, yes, the red lightsaber in the Instagram post.
Yeah.
For Star Wars fans, that's the color associated with the Sith, the villains. So it definitely got people talking about the symbolism, intended or otherwise.
Oh, always layers of meaning there. Okay, finally, let's touch on the legal news cover. A big ruling against a Trump administration executive order.
A very significant one, yes. Judge Beryl Howell struck down an EO that seemed targeted at the law firm Perkins Coie.
Why targeted?
The judge's ruling was pretty scathing. She basically said the order looked like retaliation because the firm represented opponents like Hillary Clinton, filed lawsuits challenging the administration, and supported things like DEI initiatives.
And she called it unconstitutional.
Yes, violating the First, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments.
Yeah.
She really emphasized how vital independent lawyers are. Lawyers willing to challenge the government without fear of punishment.
A strong defense of that legal principle.
Absolutely. She drew a contrast between Perkins Coie and other firms she suggested had maybe bowed to pressure.
And there was also a final resolution in a North Carolina Supreme Court election challenge.
That's right. A judge ruled against Jefferson Griffin's challenge, confirming Allison Riggs's victory. The key point there was upholding voters' rights, rejecting the idea that minor administrative errors should disqualify otherwise valid votes. It affirmed due process for voters.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it's clear we're in a period with a lot of tension, a lot of conflicting signals.
Definitely. You've got this weird disconnect in the economy.
Yeah.
Nervous consumers, but okay, job growth, headline GDP down, but core GDP up, tariff uncertainty looming over everything.
And politically, it's just as dynamic. Key elections taking shape, unusual policy debates, and these really fundamental legal challenges about democratic processes.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How do all these threads, the economy, the tariffs, the politics, the legal battles, how are they all going to weave together?
Yeah, what's the ultimate impact going to be? For you listening, how might this mix of cautious consumers, active job markets, potential trade wars, and fights over the rules of the game? How does that shape your future, your opportunities, the challenges you might face?
It's a complex picture, no doubt. There's no single easy answer. It really forces you to think about which of these developments deserves more of your attention, right? Where should you focus your energy to stay informed?
Absolutely. Is it the week-to-week economic numbers, the long game of these Senate races, the precedents set by these court rulings? Lots to consider as we navigate, these very interesting times.